Welcome back, everyone, to our preview episode this week for the College Sports Hive. That is Leif and I am Scott Stevens, back again with you to break down another fantastic weekend of college football. We got a lot of excellent games on the docket to preview for you this week. We're going to start with number 9 Indiana at number 3 Ohio State, and then we have number 10 Wisconsin at number 19 Northwestern. So we've touched on two pretty much division eliminators here in the Big Ten. We have the division eliminator in the Big Ten East and then the division eliminator in the Big Ten West. The winner of both of these games this weekend will have a clear leg up on the competition in the rest of their division to play for the Big Ten championship game come December. Also, we have a very good game in the Big 12. Number 14, Oklahoma State, is traveling to number 18, Oklahoma. And then the last one we'll touch on for you is number 20, traveling to Utah. Utah's been riddled with COVID issues, so we have some interesting notes there to touch on, and we have the possibility of a footnote there of if Utah cannot play and they cancel for the third straight week. The Pac-12 has already announced that they will try and refigure and reschedule it to have number 20 travel to 2-0 Colorado, which will be another very big game either way for the Pac-12 South Division. So, well, those are the four games that are going to be touched on in this preview episode. We're going to start now with our game of the week. Number 9 Indiana is 4-0 on the season so far, and number 3 traveling to number 3 Ohio State, who is 3-0. This game is going to be in Columbus, Ohio at noon Eastern time, kicking off on Fox with Gus Johnson, Joel Klatt, the good big noon kickoff games. It's going to be one that you don't want to miss. Probably one of the better games of this football season. So Ohio State's given a 90% chance of victory via the ESPN FBI. Do we think that's a little much, or do you think that's pretty accurate?
I think 90 is just high because 9 out of 10 is pretty high. But I do think Ohio State is comfortably the favorite in this game, and they deserve to have that inflated rating. But 90% just feels high because I don't think there's only a 10% chance that a top 10 team wins.
Sorry, go ahead.
But FPI just they know stuff we don't. Like they had Virginia Tech, it didn't end up working, but they knew that Miami was missing people. So who knows? Sometimes the FPI knows better than we do.
Absolutely. So we've touched on the potency of the Ohio State offense led by Justin Fields, their quarterback. He only has 11 incompletions so far through 3 games. He's 72 of 83 for almost 1,000 yards, 908 yards, and 11 touchdowns with 0 interceptions. That's just kind of Xbox numbers there where you don't see this very often out of a quarterback, and the just taking care of the ball as well as the proficiency that he's throwing for is very much something to be in awe of, to be honest.
I mean, you said it there, that he's got 11 touchdowns and 11 incompletions. That's ridiculous. Like that, you can watch any football game this Sunday. I mean, Saturday or Sunday, NFL or college, and I guarantee you, one of the teams of the quarterbacks will have more than 11 incompletions, much less in 3 games. And I guarantee you, in that one game, they aren't going to have 11 touchdowns. So, I mean, it's pretty ridiculous how efficient he's been, how dominant this offense has been. But I think Indiana has some pieces that could actually give them some trouble, and especially with their secondary.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll touch on their secondary here in a little bit when we flip the script on this game, but let's keep it on Ohio State for the time being. They have a kind of a dual-wheeled rushing attack there with Master Teague, who has 47 carries for 211 yards and 4 touchdowns, and then Trey Sermon, who's their change of pace back, 36 carries, 172 yards, and no touchdowns. So Master Teague is that big bruiser who gets the goal line carries and punches in touchdowns when Ohio State needs them. But then also it's coupled with so much talent on the outside there. Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave are two of the best wide receivers in the country, and they're honestly all on the same team. So it's an offense that is riddled with talent. They don't get stopped very often. What do we expect in this game from this offense? Do they continue this success rate that they've been having?
I think they're going to have to work for it more than they have, but I still think they're going to put up their points at a high clip, and the game's more focused on who can get stops. But I think Ohio State's going to move the ball with ease in the game. It's just a matter of scoring 7s rather than 3s for both teams. I think Ohio State's going to have to run the ball a little more, establish more of a running game through Master Teague, kind of just putting his emphasis on the game. He's a bruiser, as you touched on. I think playing a little smash mouth football to open up the game more for Justin Fields could be really, really important. And then I wonder if we haven't really seen Justin Fields run yet, but he's For those of you who don't know, he's very fast and very mobile. So I think that could be this kind of a secret weapon that they've kept hidden so far this season.
Absolutely. It's one of those things that doesn't get touched on as much as it needs to. His athletic ability just to even extend plays and give his wide receivers more time to get open downfield is definitely something to be aware of for this Indiana defense. Let's keep it on the track of offense, but flip the script over to Indiana. Michael Penix is having a fantastic season so far. He hasn't lost a game yet. He's 91 of 150, over 1,000 yards, 1,070 yards, 9 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. We've seen him, though, have some scenarios where he doesn't take care of the ball necessarily well against Michigan, against other teams like that, where they've had some turnovers that could have costed them and will cost them against an Ohio State team like this.
Yeah, I think it's of paramount importance just to take care of the ball. I think he's taken some risks in games where they've had firm control. And in this type of game, there's no margin for error, and you can't give up possessions. We talked about this when Penn State was playing Ohio State. You can't have turnovers against an Ohio State team. You have to come out with 7s rather than 3s in the red zone. And I think he's like a catalyst for them. He's a lightning rod, and if he gets out of the pocket, makes some big plays, their offense becomes electric. But he can't have any of those big plays that turn into negatives where he fumbles at the end, or if he tries to throw a crazy throw that could work but probably won't against an athletic team like Ohio State.
Absolutely, yeah, and we've touched on the playmakers that Ohio State has on the offensive side of the ball. Indiana has just as many playmakers as well. They have 3 wide receivers that have had over 100 yards so far, and they've all caught touchdowns as well. Stevie Scott's a great running back. Stevie Scott the third, pardon me, is a great running back. 83 carries, 319 yards, and 5 touchdowns. So this is a game where the offense I don't think will be an issue. I think it's going to be determined on which defense makes more plays and makes more stops to win the game and to halt the momentum of some of these offenses, because honestly, you know what Ohio State's going to do to you. They're going to strike fast. They're going to try and have their offenses on the field as much as humanly possible. They're going to try and score as many points. They're going to go for it on 4th down. It's just the breed of football that they've started to create. And it's very, very hard to stop. So I think if Indiana can create a few of those stops and create some confidence in this football game early, it's going to be very, very telling as to how this team will compete with Ohio State in a scenario that is not necessarily as scary to go into the horseshoe this year to play an Ohio State team like that.
Yeah, absolutely. No fans being there is one of the bigger things that if I'm Indiana, I'm saying, hey, this isn't an impossible game at all. Like, fans being there, being at Happy Valley at the Big House, really is something in the Big Ten where that can deter games. They can flip the script. Penalties there based off crowd noise. That you don't have to worry about. The execution shouldn't be an issue. You've got more games in you than Ohio State has. I really think that Indiana has a chance, like a legitimate chance, to come in this game and make it extremely competitive, if not pull an upset, which in past years you'd sound ludicrous saying. And I think that their defense is more equipped to face this Ohio State offense than any defense in the Big Ten. And I'm excited to see how that matchup goes, because if you can get one stop or even early, just get yourself like, hey, we belong in this game. I think that could really flip the script and go a long way for an Indiana team.
Absolutely. We saw how Michigan kind of responded when Wisconsin got 2 quick stops and punched 14 points on them, and it's just over like that. Like you can't play a team in that scenario. So I think if that happens to Indiana this week, where Ohio State goes up early at 14-0, you saw that against Penn State. They spotted Ohio State 14 points. Like that can't happen. You can't be playing this Ohio State team from behind and expect to win. But let's talk about that defense for Indiana though, because this is a secondary that is definitely the best that Ohio State has played so far this year, and probably one of the better ones that Justin Fields has seen in the Big Ten in his time here. The Hoosiers have 4 defensive backs that all have over 20 tackles, and let's go through some of these. Tywan Mullen has 21 tackles. He has 2 interceptions and 2.5 sacks for a corner. Devon Matthews has 21 tackles, 1 interception and 1 sack. Reese Taylor, 20 tackles, 1 interception, 1 sack. DeMar Johnson, 20 tackles, 1 interception, and 1 forced fumble. So these guys are just active, all-hawk football players that get all over the field. The Hoosier defense has 10 interceptions and 3 forced fumbles so far through 4 games. That's how they're competing, and that's how they're winning these games, is they're creating those plays on defense to give their offense chances to go up by multiple scores.
Yeah, they're calling games really aggressively. They're relying on their secondary, who's not only good at tackling in space and coming up out of the backfield and and aggressively tackling, which you'll hear any commentator in the game when a corner comes up and makes a tackle, like, coaches want more of these, and Indiana's got 4 of them. And then their linebackers also will need to play a really big role in limiting Master Teague and Trey Sermon. And they've got Micah McFadden with 30 tackles leading the team, but they have a really egalitarian approach in terms of who's leading the team in tackles. They're coming up, playing in the box, making you beat them, and trusting their corners to do good jobs. And I think that'll be really huge to see if they can limit the vertical threat of Chris Olave in specific. If they're going to come up and say, hey, you got to beat us through the air like they have in previous games, which I'm not sure is going to be their idea with Fields and Olave and a lethal connection like that. But I think it shows they have confidence in their secondary, their safeties to come over the top and then to tackle in space. And it makes it hard for a defense to knife through them and play dink and dump. They have to beat them through the air, and it makes the other teams more error prone. And Tom Allen's doing a great job coaching this team. And one little note, they're missing linebacker Tom Allen's son. He had a hip injury. And hopefully they've got some depth to replace that. I just wanted to point that out because it looked pretty nasty, and that could be an important injury.
Yeah, it's a season-ending injury, and it was one of the ones that was sad to see there for coach's son. You saw father embrace son on the cart there. It was a heartfelt moment for sure for college football. It's one of those things that you hate to see happen, but I'm sure he'll be back and be, well, after this season, of course. I'm sure he'll be back and hopefully be ready to play some other time further down in his career. Let's divulge a little bit here. You have an Ohio State team with this offense, right? And you have this defense who you've seen in the past with Penn State. Jahan Dotson, week 1 comes to mind. He got beat over the top for a long touchdown. Do we think their secondary is going to have what it takes to slow down or at least make Justin Fields look semi-human and not have Xbox stat numbers?
I think so. I think they won't play as aggressively as I talked about, playing super in the box. But I think they have the athletes that not many teams have. And Penn State had good athletes, like Joey Porter did a good job, and he made Olave make 2 really hard catches. And I think that's what it's going to take for Ohio State. They're going to have to make those big plays, make some spectacular individual plays rather than some easy ones. And I think it really goes a long way, and it shows, like, if you have to work for those, you may not throw them as often. And I think there's some mental aspect of having the athletes back there to negate some of those huge plays that Ohio State kind of, once they get one of those, they're stepping on your throat because they'll just do it again and again because they do have those athletes in that chemistry. So I think Indiana really does have the ability to limit that. I don't know if they can fully, like, extinguish that playmaking threat, but who can?
Absolutely. Then we've talked about big games so far this season and what is at stake for teams here. This is the chance for each of these teams to have a leg up in the Big Ten East Division. This is probably one of the biggest games in Indiana football history. Truth be told, it's just when's the last time we've seen them in the top 10 playing a top 5 team, with a chance to, if they win this, they have a legitimate shot of saying we're a top 5 caliber football team after already beating Penn State, Michigan State, and Michigan perennial powers in the Big Ten East. So do we think that's too much riding on this Indiana team to come into this football game and have too much pressure to play this highly touted Ohio State team and come in and put on a good performance and potentially steal an upset here?
I actually think that they don't have too much pressure. I think they're coming in kind of pressure free because Ohio State's Ohio State. Like, that's the brand in the Big Ten that's winning. That's the team that makes the college football playoff. So I think Indiana's coming in at 4-0 and still an underdog. I think that is motivating and freeing. I don't think that, like, if they were to play, let's say, Wisconsin at home and they were to be higher seeded, I think that would be a lot of pressure. But I think here they're the underdog and they can kind of ride with, like, hey, we've got nothing to lose. Let's go beat them. And I don't know if that means they will win, but I don't think there's that pressure in the sense of, like, a trap, like they'll be too amped up or anything or feel too much pressure to perform will cost them.
Right. I agree. I agree with you. Okay, so I love to make these little notes in these massive games, big games, special teams. I keep coming back to it. It's one of the bookmarks I always slide in there. Indiana's kicker, Charles Campbell, is 7 of 8 so far this year on field goals with a long of 52. His one miss came from 40 to 49 yards. I'm not exactly sure what the distance was for the exact number, but that was the yardage gap that was offered to me. The Ohio State kickers, they've shuffled through 3 of them so far this year. Blake Hallbile, something like that, is 9 of 9 on PATs, 1 of 2 on field goals with a long of 34, and he's missed from inside 30 yards. Dominic DiMacchio is 3 of 3 on PATs, 1 of 2 on field goals. His long is only 22 yards, and he missed from inside 30 as well. And then Jake Seibert is 7 of 7 on PATs, but hasn't kicked a field goal yet. So you look at this, and there's indecision and inconsistency from Ohio State's kicking standpoint, and then consistency and length from Indiana. So that's going to be a note to keep in mind in this game. And we know Indiana cannot settle for 3 instead of 7 to hang with an Ohio State football team. But if it comes down to one of these people kicking the football, I would much rather see Indiana's kicker on the field if it was my team playing.
It's interesting because I think Howbile played last season and did a decent job. And he hasn't missed a kick. He's missed 1 kick, but he's 9 of 9 on PATs, 1 of 2 on field goals. But they're not kicking many field goals. Like you can miss a field goal and then you go 0-1, and then you go 1 of 2, and it looks awful. But if you only have 2, it makes me wonder if he's just having really bad practices or something, or if there's an injury. But I'm with you that you want consistency in a kicker, and especially in a big game, kicks can win you the games. If you miss one, they can lose you a game.
All right, that's going to be at noon. That's going to kick off at noon there on Fox with Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt. Indiana traveling to Ohio State, going to be a fantastic game. We'll give you our pick and our score of that one later on here in our episode today. All right, let's move on to keeping it in the Big Ten. Number 10, Wisconsin's 2-0, dominant, traveling to number 19, Northwestern, who is also 4-0 so far on their season. That's going to be in Evanston, Illinois, 3:30 Eastern kickoff on ABC. Another high FPI here, 86% chance of victory for Wisconsin. What do we make of that stat?
One feels high because they've only played 2 games and have missed some people, but I'm really high on this Wisconsin team. I think they've been one of the more impressive teams in the 2 games they have played. And granted, neither team they've played has been very good this year, but they just look dominant, and I trust their formula that Coach Paul Chryst employs of run the ball, little play action, and play stout defense. And I think this will be a really good game and competitive, but I do think Wisconsin should be favored, but 86 seems high to me.
I agree. I think this is going to be one of those a bit more old-style, smash-mouth Big Ten games. We touched on that last week against Michigan and Wisconsin, but Wisconsin still scored 44 points. I don't necessarily think you see that this week against this Northwestern team. I think Pat Fitzgerald has his guys a little bit more disciplined right now than the Michigan side of things. And so I just think – and also I think this Northwestern team can score points with Wisconsin. So I think it's a difference in the game when you have one team who has all the momentum, dominating the football game, having possession after possession for touchdowns, and scoring 14 points in 5 minutes. That doesn't help to start things off. But also, I think this is just going to be one of those a little bit more under control football games with a little bit more discipline and all that good stuff. And it's going to be a really fun one to watch. Let's talk about Wisconsin's offense, though.
Yeah, we saw Graham Mertz come out and put an awesome performance against Illinois. He came back to earth a little bit, but Wisconsin's offense through and through has always been about the ground game. Against Michigan, they ran 51 times for 340 yards. They've got a plethora of backs. They've got Nakia Watson and Jalen Berger, who will both be running the ball probably 12, 15 times each, as well as they like to employ a nice little end around with Danny Davis III and Daryl DK. So I expect them to really have some versatile play calling, run the ball, utilize play action, try to get some chunk plays. And they've got a nice receiving tight end as well in Jake Ferguson, who's got 4 touchdowns already through 2 games.
Absolutely. We'll put some respect on Graham Mertz's name. We touched on Ohio State and Justin Fields. Graham Mertz also only has 11 incompletions so far in the year, so he's through 2 games, granted. But he's also having a fabulous season, 7 touchdowns thrown, 0 interceptions thrown. So he's also taking care of the ball and leading this Wisconsin team to great success on the offense. Seeing a Wisconsin team put up 40 points in back-to-back weeks is something not everyone's used to. So I think there's an added dynamic here with Mertz's arm and his ability to keep control of the football, not necessarily something we've seen a lot in the Wisconsin teams as of late. So I think that's a dynamic that makes this team very scary and can put up points on anyone. So they're not as one-dimensional. They're not as they have a phenomenal running game, like you touched on, and they always will. But also the added 200 yards and 2 touchdowns from their quarterback consistently is something that they haven't necessarily had in the years past, and makes them very, very scary for a lot of other defenses.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we'd be remiss if we don't mention the offensive line. Like, I know that that's kind of implied with the running game and the stats we put out there, but their offensive line year in, year out is incredible. And this year is no different. They absolutely dominated some really talented players from Michigan. And I don't think they'll ever be like exposed. And I think that Mertz, because he's able to sit behind that, is able to have some time, and he adds an element of dynamics that Jack Cohn frankly didn't have last year. And I think that's what makes Wisconsin a legitimate contender this season, if they're able to play enough games, which is why the COVID hurt them, because they have some dynamism on the outside, as well as just running the ball up the gut like they do every year.
Yeah, I think this is a massive game for Wisconsin. I think this is a game where they kind of solidify their case as a top 10 team. Northwestern, obviously, this is a huge game for them. They're 4-0, looking to go 5-0 and have a massive leg up in the Big Ten West. But let's talk about Northwestern there a little bit. Peyton Ramsey's having a good year as quarterback there for Northwestern. He has 723 yards and 6 touchdowns. He does have 4 interceptions though, so gonna need to see some more consistency and taking care of the ball there for Northwestern if they want to keep in this game with Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think those interceptions are a little uncharacteristic for not Wisconsin team, excuse me, Northwestern team. They like to take care of the ball, they like to run, and then use play action. But I think Ramsey adds an element of he can get outside of the pocket. He has 122 yards rushing on 34 carries and a touchdown. And then they've got an underrated running back in the Big Ten, Isaiah Bowser, who's got 61 carries for 182 yards and a touchdown. But they also have 6 different players who've rushed for touchdowns. So they're similar to Wisconsin in that they've got a multifaceted running attack, and they can also run the ball with their quarterback. And so it'll be interesting to see this kind of who can control and dominate time of possession, which is both of these teams are based on running games and clock management and being safe with the ball.
Do we see more than 20 points a team here in this game?
I think so. I think Wisconsin has proven that they're pretty dynamic on offense this year. They've gotten a lot more chunk plays than they have in years past, and I think the defenses aren't quite as good as what I've seen in years past. Maybe I know they picked off Milton, but I think that was just kind of the game was right over as it started. But they gave up some yards after that. I think it might be like a 30-20 type of game. I don't think it'll be like a 20-17 unless it's like ice cold.
That's always a possibility.
You always got to put that caveat in Big Ten play. I just want to put that one out there in case I'm totally.
Yeah, not sure the weather what it's going to look like there in Evanston, but I think you're probably right. I bet it's probably around like 28-21 or something along those lines. I think both teams will score. And I think it'll be an entertaining one to the end. Maybe like 24-21, something like that. I think it's going to be a very, very solid football game. The best display that the Big Ten West has to offer so far this season. That game's going to kick off at 3:30 Eastern time for you on ABC. Wisconsin traveling to Northwestern, going to be a good one there in the Big Ten. Let's move on to the Big 12. Number 14 Oklahoma State is 5-1. Traveling to number 18 Oklahoma, who's 5-2 with 2 losses so far in the season, but they're resurging in a big way. This game's going to be in Norman, Oklahoma at 7:30 Eastern time on ABC. That's going to be Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit for everyone in that game. ESPN FPI has given Oklahoma a 74.1% chance to win this football game, even though they are ranked 18 and Oklahoma State's ranked 14. Do we kind of agree with that? What are we going to see here in terms of this football game?
I think that the reason the FPI is favoring it is just Oklahoma State hasn't looked like itself ever since it was upset by Texas. They've really struggled taking care of the football, and their offense, while dynamic, keeps shooting itself in the foot, and their defense has taken a step back as a result. Um, and that said, I think it's simultaneously Spencer Rattler, the extremely talented quarterback for Oklahoma, is improving. And some of those issues that Oklahoma had early in the season are starting to go away. So I think it's a fair line. I wouldn't be surprised if it's an upset. I guess Oklahoma State winning that, but I think Oklahoma should be favored in this game.
I would agree. I think they just have more confidence coming into this football game. Spencer Rattler's playing very well, and then the other Spencer on the other side of things, Spencer Sanders for Oklahoma State, is just not necessarily playing the best caliber of football that he needs to lead this Oklahoma State team to success. They have a dynamic back, Chuba Hubbard. We've talked about him before. He's had some lackluster performances in the last few games because it's just been so easy for defenses to key up to stop him instead of allowing Spencer Sanders to have that dynamism to be able to make plays to beat a team rather than just relying on Chuba Hubbard to run all over someone. You need a team that can throw. You need a quarterback that can throw the ball to open up the running game against a team like Oklahoma. Spencer Sanders has 30 incompletions so far in the year, 63 of 93, 766 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. He's missed a few games with an injury, but he's back down. He's played for the last few weeks, and his stat lines have been a little bit underwhelming. I think he needs to have a much better performance in this game to have Oklahoma State see success and to allow their defense, who's been very good, which we highlighted early on in the show in our first few episodes, that is probably the best defense in the Big 12. They've just been on the field too much, quite honest with you. And so with that being said, I think they need to keep the ball, control the ball, allow Chuba Hubbard to run, but also have plays to make that Oklahoma defense a little bit more honest, and they'll see success, I think, in this game as well, though. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, and I think Sanders, they need to simplify the game for him a lot. They've been doing okay, you hand it off to Chuba, and then now that that's not working, what used to work, it was just a deep ball to Tylan Wallace in specific. But now he's having to see the game differently with people swarming around, and he's fumbling the ball. He hasn't necessarily been intercepted a ton, but he had 3 fumbles against Texas as well as an interception, and that's just inexcusable in a game with the caliber of athletes of a Texas or an Oklahoma, and that'll lose you a game. And in that game, the defense kept them alive until overtime, and then there was another turnover. That as for Oklahoma, I think that the big thing is taking care of the ball as well. I think Rattler's gotten way better. He has 6 interceptions on the season, but he's thrown the ball 208 times, and many of those interceptions came early in the season. His big play guy is Marvin Mims, who's got 418 yards and 7 touchdowns. So I think a big thing that you could watch for is who has a better game between Marvin Mims and Tylan Wallace, and I wonder if the winner of that competition wins this game.
Absolutely, a huge deep play potential there for Marvin Mims to bookmark there. He only has 25 catches for that 418 yards. So some sincere output there with his touches so far this season. I just think to be completely honest with you, I'm just not sure Oklahoma's defense has enough to stop Chuba Hubbard like some of these other offenses do. I've seen Oklahoma get ran on time and time again with some missed tackles, some lackadaisical play, and it's going to be one of those things where Chuba Hubbard is probably the best back in the Big 12 in my opinion, and he's going to have a big game. It's going to revolve around him. It's going to revolve around Spencer Sanders and this Oklahoma State offense to impact this game enough to keep Oklahoma's offense off the field, kind of like we touched on with Indiana, and not allow Spencer Rattler to get into a rhythm and to dominate this football game with over 300 yards passing.
Yeah, and that being said, I think that the most important part of this game is for Oklahoma just putting a few extra guys in the box early to stop Hubbard, because I think that could hurt you more than what I've seen Sanders can do. He's really struggled. And Oklahoma has elite athletes. They just haven't executed well as a defense. So I think they could, ball hawk a little bit and make him throw to beat you rather than let Chuba Hubbard dominate the game and keep their defense off the field, which, like we said, is a really good defense. And them and West Virginia are the 2 best defenses in the Big 12. And I really think that it comes down to who can take care of the ball. And I mean, I know that that's pretty much any game, but especially this game, because both offenses can score at a high clip. but the Oklahoma offense is, I mean, Oklahoma defense is really bad, so they need to score at a high clip. And if they're playing from a front, they're pretty good. And Oklahoma State is not going to play well from behind. So I think that'll be really an interesting dynamic to follow.
I agree. That game's going to kick off at 7:30 Eastern time on ABC. There, that's number 14 Oklahoma State traveling to number 18 Oklahoma. That's going to be another great one this week. Our last game we're going to preview for you is going to take place in the Pac-12. Number 20 USC is 2-0 coming into the season. They've looked iffy at times, but they've made enough plays down the stretch to win both of their football games so far against the Arizona schools. They're traveling to 0-0 Utah because they have had their first 2 games canceled due to COVID issues in their program. That's going to be here in Salt Lake City at 10:30 Eastern time on ESPN, that Pac-12 after dark slot there. Surprised me at least. I think it's going to surprise everyone. Utah has a slight edge here in the ESPN FPI at 55.3% chance to win. What do we make of that stat, seeing as we have no earthly idea what product Utah is even going to be able to put on the field?
Well, frankly, I'm stunned because USC is USC. Like, I don't care who it was against, but it's just like if a team's 0-0 and you're playing a 2-0 USC, no matter how bad those games are, you expect USC to be favored. So I'm stunned, especially because coronavirus, no one knows who's playing for Utah and who's not. Coach Whittingham had a press conference and said that they're doing a lot better. They've only got a few guys that are still affected, but like, you haven't played a football game in so long, and now you're playing against an extremely talented USC team. I don't think that is an accurate poll by the FBI, but like I said, the FBI might know more than I do.
Absolutely. So let's touch on Utah here first. We're not necessarily sure who's going to start at QB based on they haven't announced out of fall camp yet whether it's going to be Cam Rising or Jake Bentley, but also we've seen tweets earlier last week that if they were to have played their game last week, that Britton Covey might have had to start at QB because they've had so many COVID issues there. So at this point, there's 4 question marks on our document here. Is it going to be Cam Rising, Jake Bentley, Drew Lisk, who's the 3rd string QB, or Britton Covey starting at quarterback? So that's where we're at in this football game. It's basically just a little bit comedic at this point where we just have no earthly idea who's going to be on the field. But then, so one of those 4 guys will hopefully be starting at quarterback for Utah. And then you have a couple other guys on offense to watch out for. Britton Covey, whether he's playing quarterback or wide receiver, needs to have a bigger year. Samson Nakua, Brian Thompson, Brant Keithy is a great tight end. And then they'll filter in 2 different running backs, Devin Brumfield and Jordan Wilmore. So they have experience there on offense, but that's again with a massive asterisk of who we don't know if any of these guys are going to play.
Yeah, and I mean, it's rare for a Utah team anyway, regardless of whether COVID or not, to be led by, experience-wise, by an offensive team. So this offense has a lot of expectations on its shoulders. They're supposed to carry the load because the defense lost 9 starters from a season ago. And I think it'll be very curious to see, one, who starts, because it'll be their first game as the starting quarterback at the U, and 2, how effective they are coming off having not played a football game and not being hit and playing a team like USC who's got 5-star athletes all over the field. So I worry that the offense will try to force plays. And I wonder if it'll be conservative play calling to stop that from happening from offensive coordinator Andy Ludwig, because against USC, the thing you don't want to do is play from behind because they've got the athletes to make these huge plays that can really swing a game.
Let's talk about Utah's defense real quick because they drafted 9. They put 9 players into the NFL draft last season. They lost 10 starters on that defense, so that's enough to replace to set a program back a few years, to say the least. They got one of their best recruits on defense in a long time, and quarterback Clark Phillips III. He's likely to be matched up, if he's playing, against Amon-Ra St. Brown in his first college football start, the best wide receiver that USC has to offer. So that's problematic to begin with there for the Utah defense. That's going to be a very tough challenge, and we're going to see a lot what he's made of to start this game. I think if there is a strength, though, in this Utah defense is they always have prided themselves on getting experience and depth to people on that front 6, to allow them to not be in a situation where they're necessarily down a whole lot and keep people fresh. So I think they have people that have played in enough games to have experience in their front 4 at least. Devin Lloyd's going to be a huge player here at linebacker if he's playing. But you look at this secondary for Utah, coming off probably one of their best secondaries they've had in years. you look at, they have one senior so far on their depth chart, Vontae Davis. He's a grad transfer. Then they are starting 2 sophomores, and then they're starting 2 true freshmen, and Nate Ritchie and Clark Phillips the third, and then every single backup in the position is a freshman. So just so much youth, so much the uncertainty, so much unknown here for the Utah defense, and it's just going to be a lot to ask for them to take on this USC team with as much talent as they have on the offensive side of the ball to compete, let alone play in this football game if they're missing a lot.
Well, the craziest thing is you mentioned Clark Phillips, the third, guarding Amon-Ra St. Brown, but Amon-Ra St. Brown is accompanied by Tyler Vaughns and Drake London, both of whom are having fabulous seasons. And you assume, like, okay, you can limit one of those guys, but the safeties, like the last year, the Utah's accustomed to having great defensive backs, which allows the front seven to get home. Not to mention they had some draft picks up front as well. Now this year, they've got Mika Tafua and Devin Lloyd are the only 2 guys with any experience, and they need to have absolutely monstrous games, providing pressure, shoring up not letting the run game get going, because that secondary is not what it was with Julian Blackman, Jalen Johnson, Josh Nurse, and all those extremely talented guys who are playing in the pros. So I really would worry if I'm Utah about the secondary, and I think if I'm USC, I'd try to run the ball, because I think there might be a lighter box, because as a way of saying, hey, I don't know if I want Nate Ritchie playing on an island as a safety, trying to decide who to help between Amon-Ra St. Brown and Drake London going deep. Like that worries me. And I would strongly consider, if I'm an offensive coordinator for USC, hey, I've got some 5-star running backs too, in Marquise Stepp, Stephen Carr, and Veve Malapai. I would strongly consider trying to run through a Utah defense that's usually extremely hard to run through, and then use some play action. But it'll be interesting no matter what happens. I'm very curious to see what strategies both teams use here.
Absolutely. It's going to be very telling, because Utah has stolen the Pac-12 South from USC 2 years in a row now. So I think there's going to be a lot of urgency from this USC team. I think they're going to come out a little upset, a little angry, and they have healthy players. They have talent on both sides of the football that Utah doesn't necessarily, at least on paper, that we've seen so far on the rosters, can compete with, in my eyes. And because you look at this Utah defense, they pride themselves on playing man-to-man football on the back end and allowing their guys to match up with your wide receivers and stop that. That's not going to happen this week if they try and allow that to happen against Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tyler Vaughns and company. That didn't happen last year against USC, quite frankly, when USC was able to go up top whenever they wanted against probably Utah's best secondary in recent memory. So I think you look at this team, I think you look at this game, and you're just like, if you're a betting favorite, I would bet, if you're a betting man, I would bet a whole lot of change, especially if Utah's getting 55.3% chance to win this football game on USC. I just think Keaton Slovis is a very good quarterback. He makes plays when he needs to win football games. You touched on their running backs and their talent at the wide receiver position, as well as health and all that on their side. I just think it's a huge uphill battle for Utah to even compete in this football game, quite frankly.
I have 2 little quick notes that I want to bring up as well. Keaton Slovis was knocked out in the first series last year against Utah, so I think he'll come up with some extra motivation, as well as he's an NFL draft prospect, and he struggled through 2 games. I think he's bound to get better. The regression to the mean often is said when someone's doing extremely well and they're going to regress. I think he's going to regress to the mean, which is better than how he's played, and that is a dangerous thing for a young Utah secondary as well. And then secondly, Utah typically has a very good student section that is a tough place to play, and there are no fans. So I don't think there's any, because USC's they're the brand name. Everyone comes out and ready to rile up against USC. I mean, we're both students at the University of Utah. We've both been to a game against USC, and it's rowdy. And without that, I don't think Utah really has too much of a shot. So I agree. I'm firmly on the side of USC winning this game. And I mean, I don't know. I hope I'm wrong. But I don't know. It seems like a tall task.
Absolutely. It seems like one of those mountains that's almost impossible to get to the top of when you're looking at it from a Utah perspective. And you're also looking at it from a USC perspective. It's not a game that you can sleep on. You've beaten USC one of the last 2 years, but also they've beaten you in the Pac-12 South 2 years in a row. So it's definitely a team where Utah has the pedigree and the coaching to compete with, I think, anyone in the Pac-12 South. They've kind of they've kind of given that aura and that growth in the last few years to say we are a legitimate contender every year in this division. But at the same time, you don't get the 5-star recruits, you don't get the 5-star talent that USC does. And if you're missing the guys that you're trying to develop and all that stuff for Utah, it just doesn't make any sense how this can be a very competitive game. Also, with that being said, if they are missing too many guys, let's make a little footnote here of the Pac-12 will schedule USC Colorado, which is another 2-0 Pac-12 South team, which will be a Pac-12 South eliminator game. So that's going to be one to look out for too if Utah isn't able to go this game. That's going to be at 10:30 Eastern, kickoff on ESPN Pac-12 After Dark. Number 20 USC traveling to Utah. I think it's a massive opportunity for USC to take a stranglehold in the Pac-12 and really solidify themselves as a contender here. All right, with all that being said, we're going to move into our picks segment and finish off this episode for you this week. We're going to start off things back in the Pac-12. UCLA is traveling to number 11 Oregon. Do we think the Ducks have any trouble with the Bruins here?
Not really. I think that the Bruins are putting up good offensive numbers, but the Oregon defense is far better than anything that the Bruins have faced. Interestingly, they're playing against their former coach, Chip Kelly. I think they know some of his schemes, and I don't think they're too phased. I also think they're going to play better on offense because they've had two slow starts against Stanford and against Washington State. So I think Oregon wins convincingly.
I got Oregon big as well. I think their defense is going to take a big stride in this football game. Dorian Thompson-Robinson is a great quarterback for UCLA. He's got sneaky talent. He just hasn't necessarily developed the way I think a lot of people have thought he would there at USC under Chip Kelly. So maybe this is a potential staple game for him, but I just don't see it happening against a stout program such as Mario Cristobal is developing there up in Oregon. I got the Ducks big as well in this one. Good news for all of college football. Their poster boy, Trevor Lawrence, is returning to number 4 Clemson to play this week against Florida State. They travel to the Seminoles there. Do we see any issue with Clemson in return with Trevor Lawrence playing his first game in 3 weeks?
I doubt it. I don't know if he'll be as good as he had been previously, but also Florida State under Coach Norvell is not doing so well right now. I think their quarterback actually just opted out for the rest of the season. And I think Clemson really is one of the most talented teams in the country, and that shouldn't shock anyone. So I think they'll cruise at whether Trevor Lawrence plays great or not.
I got Clemson big as well. I think there won't be too much of a step back in my opinion. I think they'll be a little conservative to start with in terms of play calling and getting ETN more involved in the football game. But also it's just Clemson has the talent. They have everything that they need to win this football game. So with their guy back, I think that motivates them to have success there against Florida State. All right, LSU at Arkansas. Who do you got there in the SEC?
I think if we were to pick this game last year, I saw this was a 42-point spread for LSU as favorites, and this year is a 1-point spread, meaning it's basically a toss-up. I think Arkansas is going to win this game because they're healthier. We don't know who's going to be playing for LSU. LSU's been a little lackluster in some performances, even when fully healthy. So I'm going to take the healthier team, and that's Arkansas. And I think Felipe Franks showed they can put up points, and their defense is not doing so great, but LSU is mistake prone this year.
Absolutely. There's so much circulating around LSU so far this year. They've had some, especially this past week, they've had COVID issues. They've had an issue with sexual assault allegations and stuff like that. So a lot to be a little bit concerned with here if you're an LSU fan. I think Arkansas has proven, like you said, with Felipe Franks to score points, and LSU's secondary has proven that they allow a lot of yards and points as well. So I'm going to Arkansas as well in this one. I don't think it's necessarily going to be as close as a 1-point spread in my opinion. All right, number 7, Cincinnati traveling to UCF. This is an interesting game because we've compared Cincinnati to UCF a couple times this year, and when they had their dominant season. Do we think the Bearcats have any trouble there with the Knights?
I don't think so. I've really been impressed by Cincinnati. We've talked about them a few times. I think their defense is one of the best in the country, not only the best in the American, but one of the best in the country. And UCF's Dylan Gabriel is a really good quarterback. He's left-handed. He's a fun playmaker. But I think the Cincinnati team gets enough pressure on him to make life difficult. And I think Cincinnati will win, but I don't think they'll cruise as handily as they have the past few weeks.
I got Cincinnati. I think they'll have a good performance as well. I think again this week, I just think their defense is so solid. I think they allow they allow less points and they score more than a lot of other teams in the country. And I think that potency combined is enough to slow a UCF down who's consistently able to put up points against people. A really good one we talked about in the Big Ten West, number 10 Wisconsin traveling to number 19 Northwestern. Who do you got in this one? This fun matchup here.
I talked about it a little bit earlier. I think Wisconsin's a really legit contender in this college football scheme this year, and I trust Paul Christ and company as they get healthier to only get better. They're going to run the ball well. They'll take care of the ball, play good defense, and this is no slight to Northwestern and what Pat Fitzgerald's building at all. I just think they're better at all those things than Northwestern is, so I'm going to go with Wisconsin.
Yeah. I've been back and forth on this one a lot so far this week. I've left it blank until we started this show today. But with that being said, I'm going to go Wisconsin. Yeah, I'm going to go Wisconsin. I think the dynamic that Graham Mertz adds to this offense is enough to score more points than Northwestern, I don't think necessarily the Wisconsin defense is as good as it has been the past few years, and I think Northwestern will score and compete. It's going to be a very close, very fun game there in the Big Ten, but I got Wisconsin in this one to improve to 3-0 and hand Northwestern their first loss on the season. All right, back to the Pac-12. Arizona at Washington. Arizona played a very good football game last week against USC, and Washington kind of struggled a little bit at times with an Oregon State team. Who do we got in this one?
This is a tough one because, like you said, Washington did not play well, but they showed flashes, and I thought that Arizona played a good game and outperformed what we expected. And I kind of expect a regression to the mean both ways, so I'm going to go with Washington. I think this will be a good game. This will be a kind of a testing point of Jimmy Lake's tenure at Washington, because this is his first year taking over from Chris Peterson, and he needs to win these games because the future is bright up in Pullman and Washington State, and Oregon's obviously scouting recruits up there. So this is a big game and early in his tenure. So I think Washington will pull it out, though.
This looks like it's going to be the game that determines who wins this week between me and you, because I'm going Arizona in this one. I think their performance last week against USC was very telling. I don't think necessarily USC played a terrible football game. They made some mistakes, but I just think Arizona competed really well and really hard and played a great football game and just got outclassed a little bit at the end. They scored too early and allowed USC the chance to win the football game there late. In that one, I think there's too much uncertainty still up there in Washington. I just think I like Arizona. I just like the performance that they had last week against USC. So I'm going Arizona in this one, and with the look of what's on our document, that's gonna determine who is the winner this week of this pick segment.
Yeah, that's probably true. I'm nervous because I didn't like what I saw from Washington. They get after the passer. I think they'll make Grinnell work. That's one I'm certainly not confident about.
It's going to be a fun one for sure. All right, number 20 USC traveling to Utah. If Utah can play, who do you got in this one?
I think you have to go with USC. I mean, it's just they have so much talent. They're playing against an inexperienced team both this season and based on who's played. You don't even know who's playing quarterback. It's their first start at the University of Utah regardless. And USC hasn't played well and is only going to play better, in my opinion.
Absolutely, USC. If Utah's on the field against USC this weekend, it's going to be – I would put a lot of money on at least 20-point victory for the Trojans. I just think there's no way –
That's high.
I don't think there's any way that you can foreseeably convince me that Utah is going to be able to compete enough in this football game, especially with what's at stake for USC and moving forward in their season. I really don't see it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right. I don't know. But at this point in time, what I've seen so far out of how Utah's handled the COVID issue and what I've seen from USC on the football field, being able to make the plays when they need to, absolutely going USC in this football game. But let's look at a little note in this. If Utah can't play and USC at Colorado is scheduled, who do you have in that one?
This is really hard for me. I don't like picking the favorite for USC here. I liked what I saw from Colorado last week, but I think USC has more talent, and Neuer, the quarterback for Colorado, this is his first year. He's a fifth year. but he hasn't played a lot of quarterback. I think USC will outclass them as well. I would go USC, but I kind of hope Colorado. I liked the way they played. They're sneaky contenders. I really hope this game doesn't happen yet because I want to see more of Colorado before I can make this determination.
Yeah, this game is potentially on the schedule because Colorado was scheduled to play Arizona State this week, and that's not happening due to Arizona State's COVID issues in their program so far this season. I'm actually going to go Colorado if this game happens. I think Colorado's a sneaky good football team. I think they've made a ton of strides so far this season. They've played a good Stanford team and a good UCLA team, and they've beaten both of them so far this year. So I think they've shown enough to have more confidence in them than USC has shown in their first 2 games so far this year. And if this game does happen, it is a massive game in the landscape of the Pac-12 South and what's going to happen moving forward in this division. We touched on last week in the news episode, this week in the news episode. Is there any team in the Pac-12 that can be ranked outside of Oregon or USC? Excuse me. And this is a game. If it happens, that Colorado will absolutely be ranked if they beat USC and move to 3-0. So I think this is a massive game for both Colorado and USC in this slate of things if that happens. If Utah can't go on Saturday. So number 14 Oklahoma State traveling to number 18 Oklahoma. Who you got in this one?
I'm rolling with Spencer Rattler and the Boomer Sooners because I haven't liked what I've seen from Spencer Sanders of the Cowboys. And so I think you just go with quarterback play when it's a tight game. And I think that they'll make enough big plays in this game to make Sanders play from behind. And he doesn't seem very adept at doing so.
Yeah, I'm going Oklahoma as well. I think I'm going Oklahoma in a shootout too. I don't think there's a whole lot of defense that's being played in this one. I just don't think if you look at it in that scheme of things, I don't think Oklahoma State's Spencer Sanders has enough talent to hang with Spencer Rattler in a shootout of that caliber. So I'm going to go Oklahoma as well in that one. And now we'll move on to our game of the week. Number 9, Indiana traveling to number 3, Ohio State. This is a massive game in the landscape of the Big Ten East and the Big Ten Conference in general so far this year. Probably the biggest game in Indiana football history, at least of recent memory. Who you got winning this one, and what's your score?
I really want to take Indiana. I really do. But as Lee Corso says, not so fast. I'm going to be taking Ohio State. I think that they've got the pedigree, and I think Fields he's the second best player in college football in my mind behind Trevor Lawrence, and I think in this game that matters. I think he's harder to make mistakes, and he's got more dynamism than even Penix Jr. does. So I'm going with Ohio State, and I also think that their defense is going to come to play. They came off a bye week essentially because they're playing Maryland, and that got canceled. So they've had a lot of time, scouted Indiana's game, and I think Ryan Day and company are going to come out motivated because their defense hasn't been great so far this season, and I think they're going to have a better performance than they have. So I'm going Ohio State 37, Indiana 24.
Man, I love it. I think that's great analysis. I think that's the smart play to make. With that being said, though, I've always prided myself on saying I'm going to take a good offense over a good defense, right? I've said that multiple times so far this season in college football. I think I'm going to go against it. I'm going to go against my gut. I'm going to go against the grain and say Indiana's secondary is just going to make the difference in this football game. I think they're going to make enough plays. They're game wreckers back there. They have 10 turnovers. 10 interceptions, and 3 forced fumbles so far through 4 games in this season. They've beaten the pedigree of the Big Ten East already this year. They've proven themselves time and time again. I'm going to go with Indiana to pull off a shocking upset and to stun the college football world and put everything into pure chaos with Ohio State losing. I'm going to keep my same score though of 35-31 and say that they're gonna win this one outright. I had Ohio State written down like I did. The Leaf can attest.
I can confirm, and that's why I'm so shocked. But I love it. Like I said, I want Indiana to win. I want this chaos. I want a chance for Cincinnati to make the playoff. I want a chance for Wisconsin to make the playoffs. I want this season to be as chaotic and who can make the playoff as any there's ever been. And this is a big way to do it. And I am really hoping you're right. Like I'd rather be wrong about this and lose this betting section and have this happen. I don't know. I think Fields is really, really good, and he can make plays with his arms and the legs even better than Penix can.
Absolutely. He's been superhuman. He's been superhuman so far this season, but I think Indiana just makes enough plays to make him human. And I think if Justin Fields has a human performance, just human, like not superhuman, human, and makes maybe one mistake that can even not let them convert a fourth down or something like that, is going to be a telling moment in this game. And I just think Indiana's offense has enough to compete with a subpar for their standard Ohio State defense. So I just think, and also slide in that little anecdote of special teams. I just think there's a lot, and it's not as scary to go to the Horseshoe this year and play this Ohio State team. So I'm just, Indiana's riding a momentum that they've never ridden before in their lives, and in this program it's so far that I've seen in recent memory. So I'm going to roll with the momentum. I'm going to roll with Indiana, and it's not necessarily just because I want to see chaos. It's I think they actually can compete and play a very solid football game against one of the best teams in the country.
I love the pick. And I forgot to mention this when we were doing this. I just want to give this one little plug. I think one of the best matchups of this weekend individually, I like to put these individual matchups, like I talked about Tylan Wallace versus Marvin Mims as receivers. But this is an individual matchup that will really be important. I think Freifogel, what a name for Indiana. He's just coming off 200 yards and 2 touchdowns last week, versus Sean Wade could be a really big matchup in this game for Ohio State and Indiana. And whoever wins that may well win this football game.
All righty, you have it there. That's gonna do it for us this week so far on our preview episode. Make sure to tune in on Sunday. We'll have a recap of what all transpired this weekend, and we'll see who is right here in our picks this week, and see who takes the lead in the season thus far. 4 very, very good games that we previewed for you so far this week. There's a lot more on the docket, so make sure to tune in and have a wonderful football Saturday, everyone. And we will all see you on Sunday.
See ya.